Yes. Yeah, be strange. Can you let me go?
Hello and welcome to another episode where we attempt to fall asleep, but we succeed because we have the help of Habibi Spice, who, if you did not look at the name of this channel, is me. Tonight, we are going to be celebrating the start of spooky season. We already did one installment of spooky season last episode. So if you have not watched that, we read Frankenstein. Very, very lovely story. If you like the spooky vibes, then go watch it first. Because most likely it will put you to sleep. Just like little Larry. Now today, we are going to be reading another classic provided by the same viewer, Dracula. Dracula, if you don't know, is a vampire. A vampire, if you don't know, like blood. He suck your blood. He eat your blood. Just like you eat Taco Bell, he eat your blood. There is difference. You want Pizza Hut, he want your blood. You want In-N-Out Burger, he want your blood. You want blood, you're Dracula. Very interesting stuff. We are going to be reading chapter 1. And it is interesting because with these stories, it is always the later chapters that get spicy, not the exposition. But if you want to read, if you want to hear more of this, just let me know in the comments. Just like the previous videos, and we can read more. These books do not disappear after I read them once. They still sit in my apartment. Okay? Jonathan starts his journey. Habibi, who's Jonathan? We're about to find out. Woo! Went the whistle, and Jonathan Harker shut his eyes, allowing the romance and rhythm of the train to overtake him. He was traveling to Wait, was that who? Was that the train sound? I would put choo-choo. He was traveling to Transylvania by rail to conduct some business with Count Dracula. Jonathan was a lawyer who worked for the firm of a Mr. Peter Hawkins. The firm was advising the Count on the purchase of Carfax, a very old home in London. Habibi, Carfax, you put your car VIN, your vehicle identification number, and it gives you the history of the car. Old home in London, maybe Carfax too. Along the way to Transylvania, Jonathan visited Vienna, toured the streets of Budapest, strolled the splendid bridges over the Danube, and had an excellent supper of chicken paprika, a specialty of the region, at the Hotel Royal in Klausenburg. For some reason, he was very nervous. Although his bed at the hotel was comfortable enough, he had all sorts of strange dreams. It must be the paprika, he thought. After more paprika for breakfast, this time in his porridge, Jonathan got back onto the train. Honestly, maybe he took some melatonin. I had COVID a couple weeks ago. It gave me insomnia. I tried melatonin, and melatonin gives you horrible dreams. I don't know if you've tried melatonin, but Habibi, I thought I was possessed. I stopped taking melatonin. I still have insomnia a little bit, but don't sell me melatonin if it's going to give me fucking horror movie at night. After more paprika for breakfast, this time in his porridge, Jonathan got back onto the train to continue his journey to the east. Looking out the window, he saw a country that was full of beauty of every kind. Oh, he saw me. There were streams, sweeping rivers, little towns, and the occasional castle on a hilltop. He also saw Habibi Spice walking on the sidewalk. I added that for flair. And at every station they passed there stood groups of interesting people, including women with full white sleeves of petticoats, and Slovakian men sporting heavy black mustaches, big cowboy hats, and enormous studded leather belts and boots. It was twilight when the train arrived at Bistritz in the Carpathian Mountains. Count Dracula had directed Jonathan to go to the Golden Crown Hotel, where he was expected. After greeting Jonathan at the door, the hotel's elderly landlady nervously handed him a note. The note says the following: "My friend, welcome. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight, for tomorrow you will take the final leg of your journey by carriage to my castle. I trust that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Dear friend, Dracula." "Do you know the Count?" Jonathan asked the landlady. "Can you tell me anything about the castle?" But instead of answering him, the old woman simply crossed herself, handed over the room key, and hurried away. Early the next morning, however, she knocked frantically on his door. "Oh, young man," she cried, "must you go?" Jonathan replied that indeed he must, for he had important business to conduct with the Count. "But don't you realize where you are going?" the landlady asked. "And on what day?" She didn't wait for answers. "It is the eve of St. George Day. Tonight at midnight, all of the world's evil things will take control." Jonathan tried to comfort the old woman, but it was to no use. Finally, firmly, he repeated that he had a job to do, and he would be continuing as planned on the last leg of his journey that night, by coach. "Well, then at least take this, if only for your poor mother's sake." She took a crucifix from around her neck, and she reached up and around to put it on his. Curiously, after the crucifix, she pressed tightly into his hand a head of garlic. After she left, Jonathan took off the crucifix and looked at it. He considered throwing it away along with the garlic. Ya haram, old lady. An old churchman of England. He didn't really approve of or believe in such things. Feeling a strange, lingering uneasiness. However, he put the cross back around his neck. When the coach arrives that evening, a small crowd quickly gathered around it, carrying his bags. Jonathan walked past the coach driver, the elderly landlady, and some other hotel guests. All seemed to be staring at and discussing him. In panicked and pitying whispers, they kept repeating the same word, Vrolok. Upon opening up his little dictionary, once he was seated in the coach, Jonathan learned it meant either werewolf or vampire in Serbian. As the coach pulled away, Jonathan noticed many people in the now growing crowd making the sign of the cross. In his tiny journal, in which he recorded in shorthand everything that happened to him, Jonathan made a note to ask Count Dracula about the townspeople's strange superstitions. Jonathan wondered why even his fellow passengers were looking at him so sadly. So Jonathan has all the signs in the world telling him not to go to Count Dracula. But he says he needs to go conduct business. Habibi, what type of business do you think you will be conducting? If everybody is giving you a cross, if I'm going to see someone and they give me a cross and garlic, I will not go. But maybe Jonathan does not have common sense. As they rode, the mountains of forest towered around them in beautiful colors of deep blue and purple and green. As the sun began to sink, however, dark shadows and ghost-like clouds replaced that rainbow. And the darker it got, the more restless the driver and other passengers became. "Can't you go any faster?" one passenger asked the driver in a harsh whisper. "I'm trying," the driver wildly whispered back. Indeed, although they seemed to be making good time, the driver was obviously racing. Jonathan held on for dear life as the carriage rocked wildly on its springs. As the coach approached the Borgo Pass, heavy thunder filled the sky. The driver and the other passenger craned over the edge of the coach, peering into the darkness, as though looking for something. Jonathan looked too, but there was nothing and no one there. "Too bad," the driver exclaimed. "The coach that was supposed to meet you to take you up to the castle is not here. You cannot wait here in the dark alone, as there are too many wolves about, and I must continue on. You will have to come with us. I can bring you back another time." "Too bad," the other passengers murmured. But why did they all seem so cheerful? "Not so fast," said a deep voice. A carriage driven by 4 coal black horses pulled up alongside the coach. This must be the Count's assistant, Jonathan thought. The man's face was mostly hidden by a great black hat, but Jonathan could see a pair of very bright eyes, glowing almost red. "You were extremely early tonight," the assistant told the driver. "But I anticipated your game. Now give me the gentleman's luggage." Wow. He anticipated his game, so this is a common occurrence. They will drive someone over there to Count Dracula's business, but they will take them early, so they miss the pickup, and they are like, too bad, and they save their life. Very clever business strategy. Not even business strategy, a human strategy. He's not gaining anything. This was chapter 1. Now let us begin chapter 2. Jonathan arrives at the castle. This must be fun. As the passengers continued to cross themselves, Jonathan said goodbye and climbed into the carriage. It was almost midnight. Remembering the landlady's words, he could not help but shiver at this, despite the blanket and hot tea that the Count's assistant had offered him. His shivering only increased when, off in the distance, wolves began to howl. The horses seemed to be shivering too, or at least snorting with fright. Just then, a cloud that had been covering the moon shifted, bathing the scene in a pale blue light. There, all around them, stood the wolves, creatures with white teeth and red tongues, long limbs, and shaggy hair. Jonathan jumped. It was terrifying to think that these creatures had been so close the entire time, but the Count's assistant merely raised his arms and whispered something to the wolves, which fell immediately back, A cloud covered the moon again, and then they were once again in darkness. The carriage climbed the remaining distance up the steep mountain to what Jonathan could now see was a vast and ruined castle. Through great round arches, they entered the dark courtyard and stopped. The driver left Jonathan and his luggage at the castle's front door, and then, with no further word or instruction, pulled away. The carriage disappeared into the night. The huge front door was made of wood and carved in great detail, but Jonathan could see no knocker or bell anywhere. Taking a step back and looking up at the castle's long black windows, he could not see even one ray of light. Just then, from behind the door, he heard steps approaching. The steps were followed by the sounds of rattling chains and great steel bolts being pushed to the side. The door swung open, and there stood a tall, old man clad entirely in black, with gleaming eyes that looked strangely familiar. He had thick, bushy eyebrows, pale skin, and very red lips. And when he smiled, behind those red lips were sharp-looking ivory teeth. "Welcome to my castle," the man said, in excellent but heavy accented English. "I am Count Dracula." He reached out and shook Jonathan's hand. Taking Jonathan's bags, the Count led him through long, dark passages and up many winding sets of stone stairs. What grim adventure will this be? Jonathan wondered as they walked. But when the Count threw open the door to what would be his room, Jonathan was slightly relieved. There, before him, was a warm, crackling fire in the hearth and the delicious dinner spread out on a nearby table. "I was silly to be afraid," Jonathan told himself sternly. "I have allowed the suspicions of the townspeople to get to me." After all, he was a professional, here to do a job. He was also very hungry. "Won't you be joining me?" he asked the Count, noticing that only one place has been set for dinner. "Oh no," the Count said. I've already eaten." The Count stayed, however, and kept Jonathan company while he ate, asking him all sorts of questions. "If a ship comes into an English port," the Count asked, for example, "can I arrange for someone to come and pick up cargo and have it transported into town?" "Of course," Jonathan said. "My firm could arrange that for you." "What if I wanted to arrange it myself?" the Count asked. "No offense. I trust you will understand that sometimes it is wise to spread out your affairs and not have one person knowing all of your business." Jonathan gave the Count the names of some firms that could take care of such matters. Only as the first dim strand of the morning sun came through the windows of Jonathan's room did the Count stand up and push back his chair. Somewhere in the valley below, distant wolves began to howl. Jonathan shivered, thinking back to the awful creatures that had lined the carriage's path. The Count, however, smiled. "Listen to them," he said, almost wistfully. "The children of the night." Jonathan shivered even more, not only at the strange comment, but at something else he noticed just then. The Count's strangely hairy hands, with long fingernails cut to a sharp, almost claw-like point. Things would be clearer, he hoped, in the morning. And that was the first 2 chapters of Dracula. We now learn that Jonathan is in denial. He is not clever, and he does not have analytical skills. He does not have common sense. He does not have what it takes to survive. Survival instinct is 0 on Jonathan. He clearly went into the den of the beast, and he expected to come out, and he is expecting to come out alive. That's not gonna happen, Habibi. But here is what's going to happen. We are going to fall asleep because we have survival instinct, and we know that sleep is good for survival. So let's go to bed, and I will see you next time. Good night.